The distant howl cut through the frigid Montana air as Grace Daugherty fumbled with frozen fingers to reload her father's Winchester, her breath coming in panicked clouds against the darkening February sky of 1887. 3 pairs of yellow eyes gleamed from between the pines, watching her with calculating hunger that made her blood run cold. Grace had been raised in these mountains, daughter of a widowed fur trapper who taught her to shoot straight and survive the harsh wilderness of the territory. But nothing had prepared her for the blizzard that had separated her from her hunting party, or the pack of timber wolves that had been stalking her for the past hour through the deepening snow. "Stay back!" she shouted, her voice thin against the howling wind as she finally chambered around. The largest wolf, a silver-backed male with battle scars across his muzzle, took a deliberate step forward, testing her resolve. The snow was nearly knee-deep now, her heavy wool skirts sodden and freezing against her legs. Her father's cabin was still miles away, and darkness was falling fast. If she couldn't make it to shelter by nightfall, the wolves wouldn't be her only worry. Another howl, closer this time. Grace swung the rifle toward the sound, heart pounding. They were circling her, using the fading light to their advantage. Her finger tightened on the trigger as a dark shape lunged from her right. The Winchester's report cracked through the valley, echoing off distant cliffs. The wolf yelped and retreated, but she hadn't hit it clean. Now they knew she was dangerous, but not deadly. "God help me," she whispered, backing slowly toward a stand of trees. If she could get to higher ground, perhaps she could hold them off, until the crack of another rifle shot shattered her thoughts. This one not her own. A wolf howled in pain, and the pack scattered momentarily, confused by this new threat. "Move! This way!" a man's voice commanded from somewhere behind her. Grace whirled to see a tall figure on horseback emerging from the tree line, rifle raised. He fired again, not at the wolves, but into the air, the sound scattering the pack further. "Come on!" he shouted, extending a gloved hand toward her as he guided his horse closer. "They'll regroup soon." Grace hesitated only a moment before slinging her rifle and reaching for his hand. With surprising strength, he pulled her up behind him onto the horse. "Hold tight," he ordered. And Grace wrapped her arms around his waist as the horse surged forward through the snow, following what appeared to be a game trail she hadn't noticed. Behind them, the wolves had already regained their courage, pursuing with determined speed. The stranger's horse, a powerful chestnut gelding, snorted with exertion as it carved a path through the deepening snow. "They're following!" Grace cried, looking back at the dark shapes moving through the trees. "That's what wolves do," the man replied grimly. "But they won't follow us where we're going." The trail suddenly steepened, and Grace clung tighter as they began to climb. The wolves fell back slightly, seemingly less certain on the rocky terrain. When they crested a ridge, the man guided his horse across a narrow stream, the icy water spraying as the animal splashed through. "Water obscures scent," he explained, guiding the horse downstream for several hundred yards before finally emerging on the opposite bank and continuing into a dense stand of pines. Grace remained silent, focusing on maintaining her grip as branches whipped past. After what seemed like an eternity of twists and turns, the trees thinned, revealing a small cabin nestled against a cliff face, smoke curling from its chimney. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, then reached up to help Grace down. Her legs nearly buckled, numb from cold and fear. "Isaac Donovan," he said by way of introduction, steadying her with strong hands. "Let's get you inside before you freeze." "Grace Daugherty," she replied, teeth chattering. "My father's Henry Daugherty has a trading post near—" "I know Henry," Isaac nodded, leading his horse toward a small lean-to stable attached to the cabin. "Good man. He'll be worried sick about you in this storm." The cabin's interior was blessedly warm, a fire crackling in a stone hearth that dominated one wall. It was a simple space, one room with a bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, shelves stocked with provisions, and an array of furs lining the walls and floor. "Sit," Isaac instructed, gesturing toward the fire as he hung his coat and hat on pegs by the door. In the firelight, Grace could see him clearly for the first time. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 25 to her 20 years, with a face weathered by outdoor life but handsome in a rugged way. Dark hair fell across his forehead as he bent to add another log to the fire. "Thank you," Grace said. her hands trembling as she held them toward the flames. "Those wolves, been trouble all winter," Isaac interrupted, moving to a pot hanging near the fire. "Worst season in years. Game scarce, so they're getting bold." He ladled something into a tin cup and handed it to her. "Drink, it's venison stew." Grace accepted gratefully, the warm broth spreading through her chest. "I was with my father's hunting party when the storm hit. Got separated when my horse spooked at a falling branch." "Lucky I found you then," Isaac said, settling into the chair opposite her. "I was tracking those wolves. They've been preying on stock at nearby homesteads." "You're a bounty hunter?" Grace asked, noting the precision of his rifle work. A shadow crossed his face. "No, just trying to keep the peace." He stood abruptly. "Storm's getting worse. You'll stay here tonight. I'll take you to your father's come morning." Outside, the wind howled, a sound not unlike the wolves they'd escaped. Grace shivered despite the fire's warmth. "They're still out there, aren't they?" Isaac nodded, moving to the window to peer into the darkness. "They are, but they won't come near the cabin, not with fire and man scent." He turned back to her. "You should rest. Take the bed. I'll keep watch." "I couldn't—" "You can and you will," he said firmly. "You've had a harder day than me." Grace wanted to argue, but exhaustion washed over her in a sudden wave. She hadn't realized how completely the fear and cold had drained her. With a grateful nod, she moved to the narrow bed in the corner, pulling a fur throw over herself. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully. Whenever she closed her eyes, she saw yellow eyes gleaming in the darkness. Once she startled awake to find Isaac still sitting by the fire, his profile silhouetted against the flames, rifle across his knees. "Do you ever sleep?" she murmured. He turned, surprising her with a slight smile. "Not much. Old habits." "What habits are those?" Isaac was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "War habits," he finally said. "I rode with the 7th Cavalry. After a while, sleeping gets complicated." Grace propped herself up on one elbow. "You were a soldier?" "For a time. Now I'm just a man trying to find a quiet corner of the world." He stared into the fire. "Go back to sleep, Miss Daugherty. Morning comes early in these mountains." Grace wanted to ask more, but respected the finality in his tone. As she drifted back to sleep, the howling of the wolves seemed more distant, kept at bay by this enigmatic man and his quiet vigilance. Morning arrived with watery sunlight filtering through frosted windows. Grace awoke to find Isaac already dressed and preparing coffee, his movements efficient and practiced. "Storm's past," he reported. "We should head out soon while the day's clear." Grace accepted the steaming mug he offered, warming her hands around it. "Thank you. For everything." He acknowledged her thanks with a nod. "Your father's place is about 3 hours' ride from here. With luck, we'll make it before midday." As they prepared to leave, Grace watched Isaac move around the cabin, gathering supplies and checking his weapons with practiced precision. There was something compelling about him, a contained intensity that spoke of experiences far beyond her own limited world. "Have you lived here long?" she asked as he helped her into her now-dried coat. 2 years, he replied. "After the army, I needed somewhere quiet." "It's certainly that," Grace observed. "Don't you get lonely?" Isaac paused at the door. "Lonely is safer than the alternative, Miss Daugherty." Outside, the world was transformed. The storm had left behind a crystalline landscape. Trees bowed under the weight of snow, the mountains rendered in stark white against a brilliant blue sky. But beauty often masked danger in the wilderness, a lesson Grace had learned early. Isaac checked the area thoroughly before helping Grace onto his horse. "Stay alert," he cautioned. "Those wolves may still be around." They rode in companionable silence for the first hour, Isaac occasionally pointing out landmarks or signs of wildlife. Grace found herself studying his profile when he wasn't looking, wondering what experiences had shaped him. "There," Isaac said suddenly, reining his horse to a stop. "Fresh tracks." Grace followed his gaze to see wolf prints crossing their path, the impressions crisp in the new snow. 5 of them, Isaac noted, heading north. "Following us?" Grace asked, unable to keep the apprehension from her voice. "No, hunting something else." His eyes narrowed as he studied the terrain. "But we should still be cautious." They continued more slowly now, Isaac frequently checking their back trail. The forest was eerily silent, the usual bird song muted by the snow cover. "Why did you leave the army?" Grace asked, partly to break the tension, partly from genuine curiosity. Isaac was quiet for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. "I saw things," he finally said, his voice low. "Did things, the kind that follow a man." "Like the wolves," Grace observed softly. He glanced back at her, surprise flickering across his features. "Yes," he acknowledged. "Like the wolves." They crested a ridge, and Isaac pointed to a thin column of smoke rising in the distance. "That's a chimney from the Whitman place. Your father's trading post is just beyond." Grace felt a surge of relief, but it was tinged with an unexpected reluctance. Their journey was nearly over, and she realized she wasn't ready to part ways with this intriguing stranger. The howl shattered the stillness, without warning, close, too close. Isaac's horse shied nervously as a large gray wolf appeared on the trail ahead, soon joined by others emerging from the trees. "The pack," Grace whispered, her hand automatically reaching for her rifle. "Don't shoot unless I tell you," Isaac warned, slowly reaching for his own weapon. "They've circled back, cutting us off." The wolves spread out in a loose semicircle, the silver-backed leader eyeing them with unnerving intelligence. They weren't attacking yet, but the message was clear. The humans were trespassing. "We need to back away slowly," Isaac murmured. "No sudden movements." He began to turn his horse, but a wolf lunged forward, snapping. The horse reared in panic, and Grace felt herself slipping from the saddle. She grabbed for purchase but found only air as she tumbled into the snow. The fall knocked the wind from her lungs. As she struggled to her feet, she saw the wolves advancing, sensing opportunity in her vulnerability. Isaac was fighting to control his frightened horse while trying to bring his rifle to bear. Grace's Winchester was still strapped to her back. She rolled to her knees and pulled it free, chambering around as the nearest wolf, a rangy female with a torn ear, gathered itself to spring. The shot rang out, but it wasn't from Grace's rifle. Isaac had managed to fire first, the bullet kicking up snow at the lead wolf's feet. The animal hesitated, growling low in its throat. "Grace, move toward me," Isaac ordered, his voice deadly calm. Slowly, she began inching backward, keeping her rifle trained on the wolves. The pack leader took a step forward, testing their resolve. Isaac fired again, this time grazing the animal's shoulder. It yelped, but didn't retreat. "They're desperate," Isaac muttered. "Starving." The standoff stretched for what seemed like eternity, a frozen tableau of predator and prey evaluating odds. Then, from the direction of the distant smoke, came the sound of voices and horses, a hunting party. The wolves' ears pricked at the new sounds. The leader held its ground a moment longer, yellow eyes locked with Isaac's in a contest of wills. Then, with a final snarl, it turned and loped into the trees, the others following like shadows. Grace felt her legs give way as tension drained from her body. Isaac was at her side instantly, strong hands helping her up. "Are you hurt?" he asked, eyes searching her face with concern that seemed to go beyond mere duty. "No," she managed, suddenly aware of his proximity. "Just shaken." The voices grew louder, and soon a group of riders appeared on the trail, her father at the lead, his weathered face tight with worry that transformed to relief when he spotted her. "Grace!" Henry Daugherty called, spurring his horse forward. "Thank God!" The reunion was a blur of embraces and explanations. Grace introduced Isaac, watching her father's expression shift from gratitude to recognition. "Donovan," Henry nodded. "Heard you were living up in these parts. Didn't know it was you who found my girl." "You know each other?" Grace asked, surprised. Her father's expression grew guarded. "Know of him. Former cavalry. Has a reputation as a tracker." He turned to Isaac. "You have my thanks, sir. My eternal thanks." Isaac accepted with a nod, already beginning to withdraw. "Just happened to be in the right place. You'll come to the trading post?" Grace asked quickly. "For a proper meal at least?" He hesitated, and she could see him preparing to refuse. "Please," she added. "It's the least we can do." Something in her expression must have swayed him. "For a meal," he agreed reluctantly. The trading post was a hub of activity upon their return. news of Grace's rescue spreading quickly among the handful of trappers and settlers who frequented the establishment. Henry Daugherty maintained not only a store, but also a small tavern and rooms for travelers, a vital outpost in the remote territory. That evening, seated at a table in the corner of the tavern, Isaac looked uncomfortable with the attention his actions had garnered. Men kept approaching to shake his hand or offer to buy him drinks, treating him as a hero despite his obvious discomfort. "You don't like being thanked," Grace observed, bringing him a fresh cup of coffee. Isaac's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "Not used to it is all." She settled into the chair across from him. "Will you stay?" "Just for a few days," she added quickly. "The passes are still dangerous after the storm." He studied her, and Grace felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the roaring fire in the hearth. Perhaps. For a few days. A few days stretched into a week as another storm swept through, dumping fresh snow on the mountains and making travel treacherous. Isaac made himself useful around the trading post, repairing equipment and helping Henry with inventory. Grace found excuses to work alongside him, drawn to his quiet strength and the rare moments when he would reveal fragments of his past. "Why Montana?" she asked one evening as they sat by the fire after the tavern had emptied. Her father had already retired, leaving them alone with the crackling flames. "Seemed far enough," Isaac replied, his gaze fixed on the fire. "From the war, from memories." "What happened? In the war, I mean." He was silent for so long that Grace thought she'd overstepped. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, as if recounting someone else's story. "I was at Little Bighorn," he said, "with Custer." Grace's breath caught. Everyone knew of the disaster that had befallen the 7th Cavalry in '76, just over a decade ago. "You survived?" she said quietly. Isaac nodded. "I was with Reno's battalion. We were separated from Custer before the worst of it." His hands tightened around his coffee cup. "Afterward, they wanted vengeance. Against women, children. I couldn't." He shook his head. "I left. Deserted, some would say." "You did what was right," Grace said firmly. His eyes met hers, searching. "Not everyone would see it that way." "I do," she replied simply. Something shifted between them in that moment, a barrier falling away. When his hand covered hers on the table, neither acknowledged it, but neither pulled away. The days that followed took on a dreamlike quality for Grace. Isaac began to smile more, to laugh occasionally. They went riding together when the weather allowed, and he taught her to track better than her father ever had, showing her how to read the story written in snow and mud and broken twigs. "The wolves have moved on," he told her one afternoon as they examined tracks leading away from the settlement. "Gone deeper into the mountains." "Because of you?" He shook his head. "Because the hunting's better elsewhere. They're not evil, Grace, just trying to survive, like everything else." She studied him in the winter sunlight. "You understand them." "Sometimes I think I am them," he admitted, prowling the edges of civilization, never quite belonging. "You belong somewhere," Grace said softly. "Maybe you just haven't found it yet." Their eyes held, and Grace felt her heart quicken at the intensity of his gaze. But Isaac looked away, the moment passing like a cloud shadow across snow. That night, as a full moon rose over the mountains, Grace found Isaac standing outside the trading post, staring at the silver-washed landscape. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, pulling her shawl tighter against the cold. "Wolves will be hunting tonight," he said by way of answer. "Good visibility." Grace moved to stand beside him. "Do you miss it? The cabin, the solitude?" "I thought I would," he admitted. "But no, not as much as I expected." "Because of the company?" she ventured, heart pounding. Isaac turned to her then, his expression unguarded for once. "Because of you, Grace." The kiss, when it came, was gentle, hesitant to question more than a demand. Grace answered by stepping closer, her hands finding his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist. When they separated, Isaac's expression was troubled, despite the tenderness of the moment. "I'm not the man your father would choose for you." "I'm choosing for myself," Grace replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "And I choose you, Isaac Donovan." "I have nothing to offer." "You have everything I want," she interrupted. "Courage, honor, kindness." He touched her face with a reverence that made her heart ache. "You hardly know me." "I know enough," she said, "and I want to know more, all of it, the darkness and the light." In the days that followed, their connection deepened, though they kept it largely private. Henry Daugherty watched with a father's concern as his daughter and the former soldier grew closer, but he held his peace, respecting Grace's independence while quietly observing the man who had saved her. Spring arrived with surprising swiftness, the snow retreating up the mountainsides, wild flowers appearing in meadows that had been buried just weeks before. With the changing season came traders and trappers who had wintered elsewhere, bringing news and supplies. Among them was a man named Ellis, a government agent who recognized Isaac immediately. "Donovan," he said, his tone making the name sound like an accusation. "Thought you'd disappeared for good after that business with the crow." Isaac's expression closed, the warmth Grace had grown accustomed to, vanishing behind a mask of neutrality. "Ellis, Army's still interested in talking to you," Ellis continued, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Desertion's a serious charge." The tavern had gone quiet, every ear tuned to the exchange. Grace saw her father moving closer, his face concerned. "I fulfilled my enlistment," Isaac replied evenly. "Paperwork got lost after Little Bighorn. Nothing unusual about that." Ellis snorted. "That's your story. Others say you refused orders, sided with hostiles." "If refusing to murder women and children is siding with hostiles, then yes," Isaac said, his voice dangerously soft. "I did that." Ellis's hand drifted toward his gun, but Henry Daugherty stepped between them. "This is my establishment," he said firmly, "and I don't allow trouble here. You're welcome to drink and trade, Ellis, but leave old grievances outside." The tension hummed like a plucked wire before Ellis finally nodded, moving to a table far from Isaac's. But the damage was done. Whispers circled the room, and Grace could see Isaac withdrawing into himself, the walls rebuilding brick by brick. That night, she found him packing his few belongings in the small room he'd occupied above the tavern. "You're leaving," she said, not a question. "It's time." Isaac didn't look up. "Ellis won't be the last. There are always men looking to make a name by bringing in someone like me." "We can handle Ellis," Grace argued. "Father has influence here." "It's not just Ellis." Isaac finally met her gaze. "It's what he represents, a past I can't outrun." "Then stop running," Grace implored. "Stay and face it, with me." Isaac's expression softened as he crossed to her. "Grace, you deserve a life without looking over your shoulder, without wondering if the next stranger is coming for your husband." "I deserve to choose my own path," she countered, taking his hands. "And I choose you, complications and all." He studied her with such longing that Grace's heart ached. "I need to think," he finally said. "Alone. I'll go up to the cabin for a few days. Clear my head." Grace wanted to protest, but recognized the need in his eyes. "Promise you'll come back." "I promise to try," he said, and kissed her with a desperation that frightened her. 3 days passed with no word from Isaac. Grace tried to focus on her duties at the trading post, but her thoughts constantly drifted to the mountains, to the lonely cabin where Isaac wrestled with his demons. On the 4th morning, Ellis approached her as she was stacking supplies on the porch. "Your friend's not coming back," he said without preamble. "Men like Donovan, they don't settle. They can't." Grace straightened, fixing him with a cold stare. "You don't know him." Ellis laughed. "I know his kind. Saw what he did after Little Bighorn. Refused to follow the colonel's orders to pursue hostiles. Said he wouldn't be part of a massacre." He shook his head. "Soft heart. Army has no place for that." "Sounds like the Army's loss," Grace replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Ellis's amusement faded. "Just thought you should know what you're dealing with. A deserter, a sympathizer." "I know exactly what I'm dealing with," Grace said. "A man of conscience." She turned away, but Ellis's next words froze her in place. "He left this morning. Saw him heading north at dawn. Guess he made his choice." Grace's heart plummeted. Had Isaac broken his promise, left without saying goodbye? She wouldn't believe it. That night, she saddled her horse over her father's protests. "He wouldn't leave without a word," she insisted. "Something's wrong." Henry Daugherty recognized the determination in his daughter's eyes, the same look her mother had worn when her mind was set. "Then I'm coming with you," he said, reaching for his coat. They rode through the gathering dusk, following the trail toward Isaac's cabin. Grace pushed the pace, driven by a growing sense of urgency she couldn't explain. The cabin appeared deserted when they arrived. No smoke from the chimney, no light in the windows. But Isaac's horse stood in the lean-to, whickering softly at their approach. "He's here," Grace said, dismounting quickly. Or was. The cabin door stood ajar, creaking slightly in the evening breeze. Grace approached cautiously, her father close behind, with his rifle ready. "Isaac!" she called, pushing the door wider. The interior was dim, but undisturbed. The fire had burned to embers, suggesting Isaac had left hours ago, but intended to return. "His rifle's gone," Henry noted, examining the pegs by the door. "But his pack is still here." A distant howl drifted through the trees, raising goosebumps on Grace's arms. She moved to the window, staring out at the lengthening shadows. "The wolves," she whispered. "They've come back." Understanding dawned. "He went after them," she said with certainty. "Ellis must have said something, stirred up the settlers. Isaac would want to track the wolves, lead them away from people before someone could hunt them down." Henry frowned. "That's a fool's errand in the dark." "Not for Isaac," Grace said, already moving toward the door. "He knows these mountains better than anyone, and he knows those wolves." Despite her father's protests, Grace insisted on continuing the search. They lit lanterns and followed what appeared to be fresh boot prints leading away from the cabin, deeper into the wilderness. The trail was difficult to follow in the growing darkness, but Grace had learned well from Isaac's teachings. The prints led steadily upward, toward a high ridge overlooking a valley. The howling grew louder as they ascended, echoing strangely off the surrounding peaks. When they reached the ridgeline, Grace held up her lantern, scanning the slopes below. A flash of movement caught her eye. Not the wolves, but a human figure moving among the trees. Following the wolves, or being pursued by them, she couldn't tell. "There," she pointed. "Father, that's him." They made their way down the steep slope as quickly as safety allowed, the howling now interspersed with the occasional bark or growl. When they reached the valley floor, the sounds had faded, leaving an eerie silence. "Isaac!" Grace called, her voice swallowed by the vastness of the night. "Isaac! Where are you?" A twig snapped to their right. Henry swung his rifle toward the sound, but Grace laid a hand on the barrel, pushing it down. "It's me, Grace." Isaac's voice came from the darkness. He stepped into the circle of lantern light, his expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "What are you doing out here? It's dangerous." "Looking for you," she replied, relief flooding through her. "Ellis said you'd left." Isaac's face hardened. "Ellis talks too much." He glanced behind him into the darkness. "The wolves are moving north, away from the settlements." "I wanted to make sure they kept going." "Alone? At night?" Henry asked skeptically. Isaac met the older man's gaze steadily. "Better me than a hunting party. These wolves don't deserve to be slaughtered for doing what nature intended. And neither do you deserve to be hunted for following your conscience," Grace said firmly. Isaac's expression softened as he looked at her. "I was coming back," he said quietly. "To you. I just needed to finish this first." A howl rose from the darkness, closer than before. Isaac tensed, hand moving to his rifle. "They're circling back," he warned. "We need to move." They made their way back toward the ridge, the wolves shadowing their progress just beyond the lantern light. Grace could feel their presence, an electric tension in the air. "Why are they following us?" she whispered. "Curiosity?" "Mostly," Isaac replied, scanning the trees. "They know me. I've crossed paths with this pack many times." As if in confirmation, the silver-backed leader appeared on a rock outcropping ahead, watching their approach with unnerving intelligence. In the lantern light, Grace could see the healed wound on its shoulder where Isaac's bullet had grazed it. "Old friend," Isaac murmured, raising his rifle not to aim, but in a gesture almost of respect. For a long moment, man and wolf regarded each other across the distance. Then, with deliberate slowness, the wolf turned and loped away into the darkness. The rest of the pack followed, melting into the night like ghosts. "They're going," Grace breathed. "Truly going this time." Isaac nodded, lowering his rifle. They've found better hunting grounds. Won't bother the settlements anymore. Henry Daugherty watched the exchange with newfound understanding. You know these creatures, he said. Respect them. As they respect me, Isaac agreed. We've reached an understanding of sorts. They made their way back to the cabin in companionable silence. Once inside, with the fire rekindled and coffee brewing, Henry cleared his throat. I owe you an apology, Donovan, he said gruffly. I judged you harshly based on rumor. Isaac shook his head. No apology needed. The rumors aren't entirely wrong. I did disobey orders. Did leave the army rather than participate in what came after Little Bighorn. And that's to your credit, Henry said firmly. A man should stand by his principles, even when it costs him. He rose, moving toward the door. I'll check on the horses. Give you two a moment. When they were alone, Grace moved to where Isaac stood by the fire. You weren't leaving, she said softly. No, he confirmed, turning to face her. I couldn't. Not without saying goodbye, at the very least. He took her hands in his. But more than that, I realized I didn't want to go at all. Because of the wolves? She asked with a small smile. Because of you, he said simply. You make me believe I can stop running, that I can build something here, something good. You can, Grace assured him. We can. Together. His kiss was different this time, not hesitant but certain. A promise rather than a question. When they parted, the decision was made, unspoken but understood. By the time summer arrived, transforming the valleys into lush green tapestries dotted with wildflowers, Isaac and Grace were married in a small ceremony at the trading post. Ellis had long since departed, and though rumors occasionally surfaced about the former cavalryman living in the mountains, they found little traction among the locals who had come to respect Isaac's skill and quiet integrity. The wolves never returned to trouble the settlements, having found new territory in the deeper wilderness. But sometimes, on clear nights when the moon was full, Isaac and Grace would hear distant howling carried on the wind. They're singing to the moon, Isaac would say, his arm around his wife, as they stood outside the cabin that was now their home. Or to us, Grace would reply, reminding us how we found each other. And on a crisp autumn day, a year after their first meeting, when Grace told Isaac that she was carrying their child, his joy was tempered with thoughtful silence. What will we tell our son or daughter? He asked, hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. About how we met, about my past. We'll tell them the truth, Grace answered without hesitation. That their father is a man who stands by his principles, that sometimes the path of honor leads through wilderness, and that love can find you even when wolves are at your heels. Isaac smiled, the shadows that had haunted him receding a little more with each passing season. And that sometimes, he added, pulling her close, those we think are pursuing us are actually guiding us exactly where we need to go.